if you spend a lot of time with large language models like I do, you can definitely be under the impression that they know a bunch of stuff, that they have all kinds of information, they even remember previous conversations, that they're kind of facts that live within them. But the truth is, if you think about the architecture of these things, there's no sense in which you could say there's knowledge in there, not in the conventional sense like in a computer where there's a file that you access that contains the information. The way large language models work is they are trained to just do something called next token generation. If you give them a sequence, so the sequence could be, a question like, what is it like to be an LLM? And what they have learned to do is to predict the very next token or word. For all intents and purposes, we could just say word. And so what is it like to be an LLM? It's going to try to predict the next word. Maybe it's as, and then you take that, stick it onto the sequence again, and feed it again. What is it like to be an LLM as? What would be the next token prediction? And then it could be as n, and then you can get as n LLM. You daisy chain them together, and you get this thing, this autoregressive next token generation. You keep doing it, iterate, and then you can get very meaningful responses that are highly consistent with the kind of things we say that people would say if they knew things, if they remembered things. And so the output is consistent with the system knowing all kinds of information about just about anything you want to talk about, whether it's a recipe for lentil soup or string theory. These things can speak knowledgeably and pretty competently about all of these things. And yet, if we think about what the weights contain, what the actual model has within it, it's just next token prediction. There's no sense in which it knows the long string of ideas that come spewing out of it when you run it autoregressively. And yet, it's able to produce these sequences. Now, the twist is, of course, that I'm going to argue is that we are also just autoregressive next token generators, and that means we don't really have the knowledge we think we do. When we recall facts and information, we're not really recalling them. They don't live in our mind waiting to be accessed like a file on a computer. Instead, what we have is a predisposition to generate certain kinds of sequences. If you ask me, who's my favorite musician or something, I don't know if I want to answer that right now, but let's just say I love Sufjan Stevens. Okay, he's a big fan. Was that fact about me loving Sufjan Stevens, him being my favorite musician, sort of already there in my brain? Well, yes, in the sense that if you ask me the question, I'm going to give you that response. Maybe 99 out of 100, maybe 100% of the time. So I'm going to have that predisposition. But if we are LLMs, what I really have is just that next token generative predisposition to say that. And so there's no sense in which I could say that piece of information lives in my mind independent of just the sequence that I generate in response to that question. So I'm not exactly sure what that means in relation to is how illusory is our general conception of memory. I think this applies to, in some maybe more intuitive or like less intuitive cases, like thinking about a memory of an event or some fact, like where did I leave my keys? Oh, I remember, they're on the kitchen table, and it could feel like I'm just retrieving that fact, like there's a stored kind of recording or whatever it is of me leaving those keys on my table. But what I'm proposing is really going on is when I think about the question, where did I leave my keys? My brain cues up a visual memory, a sequence of me putting my keys on my table. And I see that, and I observe that generated sequence, and lo and behold, I'm like, okay, boom, that's where my keys are. And so again, it can seem like I'm accessing some sort of stored visual sequence, whereas what I'm really doing is just running the next token generation in sequence. I'm just generating on demand in that moment. So to me, this really does kind of run against the grain of of how it feels intuitively to remember something, to have information, to have knowledge, even beliefs. I would argue this is something more like this predisposition rather than articulated beliefs. They can't live in cold storage if it's just this autoregressive kind of process. Then that's what it is. There's no sense in which there's an articulated belief. There's just a predisposition to articulate a belief, or maybe a predisposition to exhibit a certain behavior. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. I'm very curious to hear people's reaction to that. And if people have a critique, an alternative perspective, reasons why they think this is crazy, I'd love to hear them.